200. There we go. Good evening and welcome to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in our country over the past week or so. And as is usual, there are many things that are important enough to require our discussion this evening. I apologize, sorry. So I want to begin by welcoming all our viewers who are joining us on television in Region 5 and Region 6, Mahaika to West Coast Berbice and East Berbice and along the Quarantine Coast, all of you who are joining us on television, good evening. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome all of you who are joining us on Freedom Radio from Robb Street, Georgetown. Good evening. And last but not least, I want to welcome the thousands of you who are joining us across the length and breadth of Guyana on Facebook Live, across the Caribbean, in North America, and further afield. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. And we have hundreds of you here online: Carla Thomas, Trevor Khan, Veer Mohammed, Pamela Prasad, Neetu Marat Singh. Good evening, all of you. Navi Chan, she's in Canada. It's snowing all day. I'm reading that. Ralph Ali, Sohan Dhanraj, Anil Prasad, Bansi Prasad, Raymond Azim, Nalini Subajan, Shirley Autar. Welcome, all of you. Clarence Castello. Please press that share button on your phone. Press that share button on your computer to ensure that all of your friends are joining us in this discussion. All of your followers are joining us in this discussion. Please, let's build this audience as large as possible. Calvin Alicock, Jack Deo, Abdul Haq, Akash Basdeo, Viva Deo Saran, Shanti Dukram, Puran Sahadio, Mahendra Bechu, Niccolo Machiavelli, as a powerful name, Matbar Singh, and so many of you. Thank you for joining us, and continue to invite your friends, continue to invite your followers by pressing the share button on the phone. And I want you to share your comments with me. I want to make this program as interactive as possible. So I want to hear your views. I want to discuss your views. I want you to tell me what you feel, what issues I should be discussing, what issues I should be mentioning. Let me hear your views. Good evening, because I want the program to be as interactive as possible. So I want to begin by reiterating the government's removal of the COVID restrictions as we attempt to open the country after it was locked down by the COVID pandemic. Of course, the COVID pandemic is still with us, but I believe that we have made remarkable success in bringing it under control, and the virus itself is not as lethal and not as damaging as it originally was, and we are simply following the example set by so many nations across the globe who are dismantling the various COVID restrictions that were imposed across the world, in North America, in the Caribbean, in Europe, and in other parts of the world. People are anxious to return to normalcy, to get their lives back to some greater degree of normalcy. People have been living under severe restrictions, have been living under severe stress, have been living in very confined circumstances. Millions of businesses have been affected. Millions of persons are affected in their jobs. Millions of people are affected in the way they live their everyday life. And it's time that we return to normalcy, that we enjoy life and enjoy that which life has to offer. But at the same time, we cannot be oblivious to the fact that we are facing, as a people, as a world, a serious pandemic, and therefore we cannot throw caution to the wind. We have to continue to exercise care. We have to continue to be circumspect. We have to continue to ensure that we practice good hygienic standards, that we continue to be as safe as possible, and perhaps most fundamentally, that we continue to take our vaccines and encourage those who have not yet taken the vaccines to do so. We also have to ensure that we take the booster shots that are available. I believe that the statistics now are overwhelming. I don't believe that the arguments and the mistrust, the arguments against and the mistrust in the vaccines are credible anymore. I am happy that the vaccines have proven to be a good measure against the COVID virus and has managed to bring the virus under control across the globe. In Guyana, we have, as of yesterday, we have reduced our COVID restrictions significantly. So you are no longer required as a mandatory measure to wear face masks, though if you wish, you can continue to do so, and persons are advised to continue to do so. There is no longer any social distancing. There is no longer any rule regulating public gatherings. There is very limited rule in terms of places of employment and places of worship and public places. The sanitary facilities and the wash hand stations shall continue to be in force, and employers and religious organizations and other institutions that are public and the public dwell at are encouraged to ensure that those facilities continue to exist and be maintained. In terms of international travels, we have kept those, and the tests that are required will continue to be enforced, and those who desire to travel will have to continue to comply with those measures. Significantly, the vaccines will still be continued to be administered across health centers and health facilities across the country, and persons will continue to be encouraged to be vaccinated. Our schools will be reopened fully. The Ministry of Education is making all the necessary arrangements for that to take place. We are going to celebrate Holi this weekend, and the mandirs and all the places where Holi will be celebrated, those places will now be open up, but persons are still cautioned to exercise care and to be wary of your surroundings. So we are getting there as a country, and the world is getting there after nearly 2 years of severe restrictions imposing a lot of limitations on fundamental rights and freedom. I am happy that we are returning to normalcy, and that brings me straight into the next issue that I want to speak to, and that is the global rise in cost of living, which, as a government, we continue, and as a people, we continue to face in Guyana. They came out, this global rise in cost of living, I don't think anyone can doubt, owes its genesis in the COVID pandemic, and its effect are now still being felt, and we are reeling from shortages in building materials, in food supplies. Shipping costs have gone up, and most of it have to do with the fact that production in every sphere of activity, as well as in the agriculture sector, were all affected by the COVID pandemic. This, coupled with the change in weather patterns, as well as the vicissitudes of climatic conditions, continue to affect cost of living, cost of production, state of manufacturing, and ultimately the prices for goods and services. And then another factor of some significance rather, is the war ongoing between Ukraine and Russia. So a combination of these factors are being felt by the population here in Guyana, as it is being felt across the globe. So you have food shortages, you have rise in the prices for commodities such as fuel, and once a commodity such as fuel, the price rises, then the effect is a cascading one. It's a domino effect, because fuel affects so many other sectors in life. We are facing that in Guyana. And of course, in Guyana, we have another problem. We have a drop in prices for paddy. So our rice farmers are on the road. So you have fertilizer price increasing. This is what we are importing. We are importing that kind of inflation. Fuel, an essential commodity in the agri sector, that price, the prices there going up. Chemicals, the prices there going up. And unfortunately, the price of paddy is coming down. So the farmers are feeling the squeeze. The consumers are feeling the squeeze. Flour, the price of flour is, the flour mill here has announced that there will be an increase in price. So government now has this tremendous responsibility to ameliorate these hardships and to insulate the population from these sharp rise in prices. And that is not an easy task for any government, in particular since we are importing most of these goods and commodities. So we have no control over the prices on the world market. All we can do is use mechanisms that are available to the government to try to regulate the prices, try to subsidize where necessary, try to use the tax system to lower taxes or remove taxes so that the end consumer somehow feels less of the burden. And that is not an easy thing to do when the price on the world market continues to escalate. And that we hope that the population will understand. For example, we have been using the excise tax as a mechanism to keep the fuel prices down. We have been using Guy Oil as the government-owned state corporation selling fuel to keep the price down. But that is also is a challenge. And, we try to explain these things to persons, but it's not easy. So persons are frustrated and they go out on the street and they protest. But the government can't regulate the price that the millers, for example, purchase the paddy at, unless the government is to impose price tariffs and impose a pricing regime. And we don't wish to do that as a government. We wish to subscribe to the notion that the market must regulate these things. But that is not easy, because when the market regulates it, the prices are difficult to control, and the government is faced with this constant dilemma. But every day our ministers are out in the field. We are in the communities. We are at the protest points trying to explain what we have done and what we will continue to do to ensure that as far as possible we reduce the burden of the increase in cost of living. That is what we are constantly doing. And if you hear every time the president speaks, he speaks to a regime of actions that government is either executing or planning to execute to ensure that we bring stability to the situation. But it's a work in progress, and we call upon the population for understanding and for compassion. That's all that we can do at this point in time. We can't impose price control on the millers. We can't impose price control on the business community. It's not that we can't. We don't wish to move into that direction. That's not the style of government to which we are committed or which we would like to practice. So it's a work in progress, and we appeal for understanding, and we appeal for persons to appreciate the difficult task that the government is currently facing. Look at the cost for shipping alone. The cost for shipping has gone up by hundreds of percent. When that happens, then every item in that container, the price goes up for when it reaches the final consumer. How can a government regulate that? We have tried. We have tried to regulate duties and excise tax to a pre-COVID period. In other words, we are calculating duties and excise taxes at a pre-COVID rate so as to alleviate the sharp increase that would otherwise result from if we were to impose the rail duties. All these mechanisms are currently being employed by the government, but it's still a work in progress, and it still is not enough to keep the prices to a place where the government would like to keep it at. And hence you find this protest actions taking place. Hopefully, we will be able to exert greater control over the situation and bring it to a greater sense of normalcy. Today, also, I want to speak a little on a decision handed down by the Caribbean Court of Justice in the Marcus Bisram case. I see that it's widely reported in the media already. And in this case, the relevant facts are Mr. Bisram was charged with murder and was committed to stand trial for murder. Somewhere along the line, a magistrate, the magistrate did not commit him, I think, and the DPP used the power that is in the law, in the Criminal Law Procedure Act, and directed the magistrate to reopen the case, take some additional evidence, and to commit. Mr. Bisram has challenged that power of the DPP. That power is contained in the provision in the Criminal Law Procedure Act. And it's a power that has resided with the DPP from since colonial time. It's a power that was always there. We inherited that provision from Great Britain when we became independent. And that provision was always there in the law. And the DPP, Shalimar Ali Haq, and every DPP before her has had that power, that statutory power at his or her disposal, a power to instruct a magistrate to reopen a preliminary inquiry, take additional evidence, and to commit the accused person. On this occasion, that power was challenged, and the CCJ found that that power residing in the Office of Director of Public Prosecution, being a power that authorizes a non-judicial organ to instruct a judiciary or a component of the judiciary, that power transgresses the doctrine of separation of powers and is unconstitutional, because only an organ of the judiciary can direct another organ of the judiciary, because the judiciary as a whole is independent, and an organ outside of the judiciary cannot have a power to direct some component within the judiciary how to rule in a particular cause or matter pending before that tribunal within the judicial structure. The DPP has had that power, and as I said, has had that power historically. The CCJ found that in the year 2022, they recognized that it's a power which was in our law for decades and which we inherited. But they said that in the year 2022, with the modern trend in jurisprudence, having regard to the modern thinking on the question of separation of powers and the constitutional right of a person to a fair trial, that against that backdrop, that provision cannot withstand constitutionality, and struck it down, and basically has indicated to us in Guyana that we will have to go to Parliament to modify or amend that provision. And they are suggesting that that power be transferred from the Director of Public Prosecutions and be resided in a judge of the High Court. So, in what is being proposed is that if a DPP in the future wishes to review a magistrate, the evidence before a magistrate, and would like him or her to reopen the case, take more evidence, or to commit on the same evidence, then the DPP must not make the order or give the direction to that magistrate. The DPP must go to a judge in chambers and establish a case for that to be done. And if that judge is persuaded, then that judge will make the direction to the magistrate. So it would be the judiciary or a judicial officer giving that direction to a magistrate and not an organ extraneous to the judiciary doing that. For if an organ extraneous to the judiciary is to direct the judiciary, it would compromise the independence of the judiciary as well as it would constitute a trespass upon the separation of powers doctrine. It's a very progressive ruling, and we will have to amend the law to suit, since that is the highest court of our judiciary, and there is no appeal beyond that. Now, I want to make it very clear that the court also said that it doesn't mean that Mr. Bisram cannot be recharged. Mr. Bisram can be recharged, but obviously on different evidence, because courts have already found that the evidence that was adduced in this particular case or in this particular series of litigation is not sufficient for the purpose of committing him to stand trial for murder. So it is still open, if more evidence can be gathered, that he can be recharged and placed before a court once again. So that I interpret to be an important development in our criminal jurisprudence, and it shows, democracy at work. It shows our law evolving, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I don't want persons to misinterpret this as the state losing a case. It's not the case of losing or winning. The state followed the existing law. Now, the Attorney General was not part of the case. The DPP argued the case. But it is not that the DPP erred. The DPP followed the law. The DPP exercised a power that resided or that has resided with the DPP for decades. So there was no error committed by the DPP. It's just that the court found that the law itself is unconstitutional and should be removed, and struck it down as being unconstitutional. I'll pause here now and take some comments. Let me see what is going on the Facebook page. Maureen Rosario is looking at us from San Francisco, Northern California. Madbar Singh, Shampasat Punwasi. I'm looking for comments. Everybody saying good evening, good evening, good evening. But I would like to get comments from you. Good night. And everybody telling me that they're watching. I know you're watching, but I would like to get some comments. Start the program with the police. It's unbearable how ordinary citizens are being bullied by the police every day. This is something that we have to look into, and we are looking into the issues where persons continue to complain about police harassment. We have to continue to educate the public as well as the police in relation to police powers and in relation to the rights and freedoms of the ordinary citizens of our country as guaranteed to them by the Constitution. The police must be allowed to discharge their role and function, and they must be allowed to discharge their statutory functions and duties, but at the same time, they must not do so in a manner that infringes, that violates, or tramples upon the rights and freedoms that the citizens have. A balance must be struck. And only recently, in a conversation with the police commissioner, I have raised this issue. It is the Attorney General who is required to answer in the courts of law for police misconduct and misbehavior. It is the state using taxpayers' dollars that have to pay compensation, sometimes running into millions, for police misbehavior, police violations of the law, police violations of people's constitutional rights. And therefore, the Attorney General, as well as every citizen, have a right to speak out on this matter. We keep hearing from members of the public about the police detaining their vehicles for minor traffic offenses. Except causing death by dangerous driving, the police should not detain persons' vehicles. I repeat, unless it's a very serious offense, such as causing death by dangerous driving, the police have no right to detain vehicles for the alleged commission of traffic offenses. We have a ticketing system in place that allows errant drivers or errant road users to be ticketed. And that process is not supposed to be a long one. Reasonable time should be expended and the persons be allowed to go their way with their vehicles. When the police detain those vehicles and legal proceedings are filed, it's the Attorney General who has to go to a judge and explain why this vehicle is kept for so many days. And I can't, in law, offer an explanation that makes sense. And every day I have to keep negotiating with various lawyers and various litigants in very difficult circumstances. Arrest. A person should only be arrested or detained upon reasonable suspicion of committing a serious offense. This thing about stopping people and detaining them without cause is a violation of the constitutional rights of the citizens. And when they sue, it is the state that has to pay for the misbehavior and the violation of the law and the abuse of power by the police officers. Currently, I have just submitted to the police commissioner a legal opinion on actions that the police force itself can take against police officers who have misbehaved, or who have acted in violation of standing orders, standing operation procedures, or acted in violation of the Constitution. That opinion details the number of measures that can be taken against an errant police officers, against an errant police officer. I hope that opinion will be taken seriously, because we cannot, in a modern democratic society, tolerate abuse of power at any level in the state apparatus. It doesn't mean that persons must abuse the police. It doesn't mean that persons can disrespect the police. It doesn't mean that the police cannot detain you or arrest you or detain your vehicle in the proper circumstances. But the proper circumstances must exist. The facts to warrant the exercise of those powers must exist in every given case. So I will do a more detailed presentation on this program on this question of the police. And I will be as balanced as I possibly can, because I don't hold a brief for the police, neither do I hold a brief for the population. I may hold a brief for the law, and I hold a brief for the constitutional rights of the citizens of this country. And I speak from that perspective. So the GCOM registration, continuous cycle of registration, has recommenced from the 7th of March and will continue until the 29th of May 2022. So this is a very important exercise. And I want to use this platform and this program to call upon every person who would be 14 years and over come October of this year. So if by October you are going to be 14 years or over, now is the time for you to register. And also, all those persons who are unregistered, you are invited to register. Now, people are confusing registration with elections. Being registered, of course, allows you to exercise your right to vote. But registration and elections are two different processes. Registration is your civic and national duty, because out of registration you will get your ID card. Out of registration you will be able to get your passport. Out of registration you will be able to get many other important documents. Your licenses, your driver's license, your TIN certificate or your TIN card. It is out of the registration process that you are able to do that. And therefore, politicians don't have to be burdened with the responsibility of going house to house and try to encourage you to be registered. And I'm appealing to parents. Currently on the law books, if you are a parent and you fail to register your child, it's a criminal offense once that child reaches of age. If you are a person who are of age and you fail to register, it is a crime. You can be charged and convicted. But one would not want to resort to those drastic measures. Registration is an important civic responsibility of every citizen. And therefore, every person should take advantage of this continuous registration exercise. It is done twice a year. And then election time, it takes on a different process. But all year round, we have what is called a continuous registration system. And every 6 months, the cycle kicks in and it registers you, and then your name is extracted and put on a list, etc. But you have to take advantage of the registration system. So right now, if you are 14 years and over, if you will be 14 years and over, by October of 2022, you can register now. And we have made it easy. There are registration centers right across the length and breadth of Guyana. Wherever you are located, there is a registration center close to you. Please go in, take your source documents, and register. Make sure that you are registered so that you can get your ID cards. As I said, we are not in an election mode. We are far from elections. I'm speaking about national and regional elections. So this is not a political process. This has to do with your civil responsibility as a citizen. You don't want to be a citizen of Guyana and the registration system, the database of the country, does not have your name in it and your particulars. So please, I am appealing to all of you young people in particular, those of you who are now going to be 14 years or will be 14 years and over by October of 2022, get yourself to the nearest registration center and do your registration. Persons who, for whatever reason, you are 18 years and you have never been registered, or you're 18 years and over and you have never been registered, please ensure that you are registered. We continue to find hundreds of people at election time who are not registered. Please take advantage of this opportunity. I want to talk quickly, I'm running out of time, I want to talk quickly about a decision of a court that is of some significance in Guyana. Many persons would recall the killing of the Henry boys, a horrific tragedy that occurred in this country in 2020, I think. Remember the case that I'm speaking about, the horrific killing of 2 young men on the west coast of Berbice. You would recall that irresponsible persons started to make irresponsible statements and accusations that this murder has some political connection. And they blamed an entire village, claiming that that village is a village of PPP supporters. And they injected politics into this murder. They injected ethnicity into this murder. They used the graphic photographs of the mutilated bodies of these 2 young men who met their horrible deaths as a basis to excite hostilities among the peoples of this country. You will recall that David Granger, former president, and Mr. Joseph Harmon led a delegation, I think the following day, to the home of the Henry boys and their families. And then they held a meeting in the community. And subsequent to that meeting, there were mayhem, chaos, confusion, and violence on the roadways of Berbice. Hundreds of persons were beaten and robbed. Dozens of vehicles were broken and burnt. Thousands of people may have been assaulted, and thousands of people discommoded and inconvenienced because they were burning of the roads and beatings and protests and violence. A man I remember was shot at Bad Settlement, shot and killed because he fired a gun into some other protests going on, all as a result of this incident. Then Hari Singh was killed. Harish Singh, was killed because somehow he was believed to be involved in this killing. And then another person who was the neighbor of the Henry boys, he was also killed. Some old pensioner, I remember. And some member of the Henry family is in jail now, charged with murder, I think. All these deaths occurred because of the misinformation, the deliberate misinformation peddled by irresponsible persons, including politicians and leaders of APNU, AFC, and the mad ones who are in New York, peddling their hate and poison on the Facebook programs. Subsequently, the police arrested some young men from Blackbush Polder. And charged them. One of them, I believe, gave evidence for the state in what was disclosed in the press. And he confessed, and I believe another one confessed. And they gave all the gory details of how the murder occurred and where and why the murder occurred and where the bodies were taken and how the bodies could have been found. And they gave detailed accounts of how the horrible tragedy occurred. The point being that no person unacquainted with that incident would know the kind of facts that these three persons disclosed in their confession statements and in their evidence respectfully in the case. And as a result, persons were committed, the persons charged were committed for murder by the magistrate. That happened just 2 weeks ago. You know what that means? Well, after that level of evidence came out, it established beyond doubt that those who were peddling this hatred, how reckless they were, and what kind of intent they had. They wanted to create mayhem in this country, destruction in this country, racial riots in this country. And that is the type of politics that I'm speaking about that we have to eschew. We have to stamp out. And we know who did that. There are Facebook images up to now, still circulating, where you had a lawyer from West Coast Berbice who was a candidate on the list of APNU. And then you have many other leaders from Georgetown went down there to throw gasoline and fire, to excite the people more, to get them more hostile. And then the big leaders went down the following day, Mr. David Granger and Mr. Harmon, and they completed the task of riling up the people with hate and anger and put them on the road to cause mayhem and destruction. Look at the totality of the damage. Look at how many people died innocently simply because of reckless politics. I thought that I would remind you viewers of that ruling and the damage that it has, and the damage that the reckless statements have caused, and the damage it has done to race relations in this country. And these are the very people who are talking about racial unity. Here they accuse an entire village without absolutely no evidence of murder. They accuse the PPP and trying to implicate the PPP. They even went as far as saying that it was a victory. It was done to celebrate the PPP swearing in to office and the PPP election victory. That is the extent to which the diatribe descended. And look how many innocent people have lost their lives. Look at how many people were beaten, how many people were assaulted, how many people's properties were damaged. Look at the public properties that were damaged. People used to call me in the middle of the night to tell me that they have to leave their house and run because people were coming to burn their houses down. All the way in my Coney Creek, you had problems. Farmers were going to shoot each other because they were being encouraged, they were being provoked into violence. So I just thought that I would remind you of how easily a situation can be mishandled by politicians, deliberately mishandled by politicians who have ulterior and destructive motives. And this here that I've just explained is a classic example of what I'm speaking about. My operators are signaling to me that we are approaching program time, but before I close, I want to extend to all of you holy greetings. We will be celebrating the great festival of Phagua during the course of this week, and certainly before we meet again. So I want to take this opportunity to wish each and every one of you happy Phagua and ensure that you play Holi safely. Ensure that you observe whatever the protocols now are in place and have a great rest of the week. I must tell you that I will not be on the program for, I believe, 1 week, next week, Tuesday, as I am traveling. I will be out of Guyana and will not be here next Tuesday. So please excuse my absence from the program. Please excuse the program not being aired next Tuesday. That is because I have to attend a meeting overseas. So once again, thank you very much for being with me over the past 55 minutes or so. And once again, happy Phagua to you and your family. Thank you very much.